Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
Good Friday afternoon. It's Lin Lee with you. And for today's Industry Insight, we're talking about gaming and esports, which have quickly evolved from niche hobbies to cultural phenomena, influencing everything from entertainment to education. And with billions of players worldwide and an ever-growing audience for competitive gaming, the industry has become a cornerstone of the digital economy. And these trends not only shape how we connect socially, but also redefine how brands engage with younger, tech-savvy audiences. So as we look ahead to 2025, what will the future hold for gaming and esports in Singapore and the Asia region? To explore this dynamic landscape, I'm really excited to have Nikhil Hathiramani, co-founder and CEO of esports consultancy IMPLS Entertainment and PaperX, one of Asia's premier professional esports teams, live in the Money FM 89.3 studio with me this afternoon. Welcome, Nikhil. Great to have you with me.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. I'm very excited about this because my son actually plays this game that you have a role in. So I understand you have played a pivotal role in shaping the competitive Valorant scene, a first-person shooter game that combines tactical gameplay with unique character abilities. Now, you've worked with top teams and influencers to drive the game's popularity within esports. But first, tell us about IMPLS, your company, and how this journey into gaming and esports began.
Well, my personal journey began a bit over 10 years ago. Formally. Informally, I would say my journey began since I was 11 here in Singapore, playing Counter-Strike in the LAN shops like most young Singaporean males did back in the day. So that journey, in theory started all the way back then, the passion, the motivation to be involved in the gaming industry. About 2015, I moved home from the US back to Singapore, and I just saw the sort of growth of the industry. When we were younger and playing, there was no such thing as being a professional player. Like, it existed, but it was very, very far and very hard to reach. And even professionals back then, most of them weren't salaried. You're competing just for small prize monies, and there was no real viewership, right? There was no such thing as online streaming and the ability to watch these things. So it was super, super niche. And I mean, it is still pretty niche today, but of course growing rapidly. We started IMPLS Entertainment in 2020. Before that, I was working on my own side project doing journalism for the Counter-Strike scene.
Wow.
Counter-Strike is still around for viewers that are familiar with the game. It's still bigger and better than ever, and millions of people compete and play and watch Counter-Strike.
2020, isn't that when COVID hit?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time because obviously, before COVID hit, I think the global economy was roaring and booming, especially the gaming industry too. So, we started what we thought was the best time, but that quickly turned out to be an interesting and challenging time for any startup. Fortunately, I would say the gaming industry also saw its biggest boom during this time, right? Because the indirect effect of having everyone locked down and not much to do and everyone's at home, actually, we saw the gaming industry grow and explode. And I don't think they've fully actually recovered from those anomaly years back in 2020, 2021. Of course, generally, the floor has been raised, but the effects of the gaming industry having those breakout years, we're still feeling those effects today.
Wow. Now, you've got extensive experience in building successful partnerships and overseeing high-level competitive events. And really, this positions you at the forefront of this evolving esports ecosystem. So tell us about your role with PaperX.
All right. So obviously at the beginning, as any new company, I was involved with so many different things, but we've grown. I'm happy to report we've grown significantly since then. Today, our headcount is about 35. I always lose track because it changes quite frequently, but 35 people, including myself. So I'm the co-founder and CEO. I work together with my other 3 co-founders. We all bring very different skill sets to the table. We completely bootstrapped this project since 2020, and I'm happy to report we haven't really been looking or seeking outside funding. So this has been a journey, a very interesting one.
Okay, before we get into the business part of things, how do you pick good players?
Yeah, that's a question we get asked a lot. And I think it just comes down to domain expertise. Like if you're in the industry and you're, doing this day in, day out, it's not a very difficult task, I would say. It gets difficult when there are new games, right? Like when Valorant launched in 2020, obviously it's a first-person shooter game. For viewers that don't know, you have different genres of games, right? So Valorant is a first-person shooter, and because we came from a Counter-Strike background, it wasn't difficult for us. Like, we really knew and understood who are the good players in this type of game, specifically PC game. So, yeah, it wasn't difficult, but if a new game comes around, there's a whole multitude of, industry ways. You have chat groups, you have nothing compares to just getting down on the ground and meeting and connecting with people to understand what are the trends, who are the players, where it's going. Yeah, scouting players can come through a multitude of platforms as well. Some of the games, like, for example, Dota and League of Legends, they have leaderboards inside the games. And so there's a robust system over a period of 5 to 10 years. You have definite data that can prove to you that certain players are better than other players. But that being said, that doesn't give you the full picture, right? At the end of the day, you need players with the right attitude. You need players who are marketable. You need players who have resilience, who have the whole package. It's not just enough to be good at the game. To be a real professional player, you need the whole package.
Okay, what's the youngest age player you've groomed?
That would be our current player, actually, Forsaken. He's from Indonesia. His name is Jason Susanto. He actually joined us, I can't remember if he was 15 or 16, but yeah, we had to, go through his father, get parental consent and all of that. Some of the games that do limit the age of which that you can play, obviously because of whatever the game's rating is. But yeah, for me personally, 15, but I've known Jason since he was 13, since he was competing. He was competing in the Indonesia scene in Counter-Strike since a very young age.
Are they getting younger and younger?
I would say a bit of both, yes and no. I think the age that kids start playing game is getting younger, but to become a professional, it's a very dynamic space, and yeah.
Okay, speaking of which, what are some of the emerging trends in this dynamic space and that you believe will shape the industry in 2025?
Well, I think in 2025 specifically, what we're seeing now is, the change of technology overall, the whole landscape, in the entire world, whatever industry you're in. I think one buzzword that's thrown around these days is AI, but it can't be ignored, especially like agentic AI. And what I mean by this is AI is not something new in the gaming industry. Like, there's always been elements of machine learning and AI for characters in the game. But I think one fundamental change that's going to happen this year is player experience. Players' experiences are going to change, where previously, the bots, as they call it, the AIs in the games are very static. They're very one-dimensional. They're pre-programmed to do a certain thing or react a certain way. But what we're going to find with the advancements in technology is that player experiences are going to be more dynamic, more tailored and custom. So the AIs, or the non-player characters, as they're called in games, will react very uniquely and specifically and can actually play with you side by side. We're already seeing this with certain titles that have announced various game modes where you actually have a co-pilot, as they call. It's an AI, it's a computer player, but it mimics the experience of playing with a real human being. So that's one very interesting trend, and I think that's for the sort of consumer side and the player side. On the development side, it's also making the development cycle shorter and faster for game studios. Game studios are able to deploy updates and changes much quicker. And the unfortunate byproduct of that, you've seen in the last sort of 1.5 years, a lot of game studios downsizing their staff. This is kind of a combination of the two, right? The hangover from those good years during COVID, and then not keeping up those same performance numbers and revenue, and then coupled with the advancements of technology, making it easier and quicker to do things. So there's a bit of shuffle going on there for sure.
Okay. As you mentioned earlier, gaming's becoming more mainstream. So how do you anticipate the growth of the gaming industry's mainstream appeal impacting your business?
Well, I think for us directly, because, esports, just to define what esports is, the gaming industry, most people don't realize, is actually bigger than the music and movie industry combined, right?
I'm sure.
And because the gaming industry encompasses like PC, mobile gaming, console gaming, it's very diverse. What I think a perfect example of how it's becoming more mainstream is the recent show on Netflix called Arcane. And this comes from the lore and the stories from League of Legends, one of the most widely played video games in the world. And a lot of people, anecdotally that I know as well, got into Arcane maybe because they're interested in animated movies or TV shows. They're not necessarily a player of League of Legends, but they love Arcane. And so that's, I would say, one of the most recent examples where I can see people getting into gaming lore and culture that have nothing to do with gaming because through their love and passion for animated series. Similarly, there's a lot of cross-pollination now. I think the music and the movie industry are understanding that the youth who spend more time gaming, because at the end of the day, it's all the entertainment industry, and we're all competing for attention, right? So whether you're watching a movie or listening to music or playing a game, it's where is your attention? And I think the music and movie industry are really starting to listen and pick up cues from the gaming industry. There's a lot more movies now being created from the stories that first originated from games. You know, the last show I watched that was gaming related last year was The Last of Us. Can't remember which streaming platform that was on, but I enjoyed that because I played that game and then I watched it was at HBO, maybe, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's many, and I think that's going to continue to be the trend.
Okay, and are we seeing more girls and women playing games as well?
Yes, definitely, for sure. And I think that's also the changing tide of games becoming, I think one other trend that we're seeing is games are becoming less hardcore. What do I mean by that? It used to be that games were developed to push the envelope of technology and kind of high fidelity 4K gaming. Like that was always the next edge or innovation in gaming. But we're starting to see a growing trend of games becoming actually going backwards in fidelity, like lo-fi as they call it. So like more arcadey, casual, and
That's
that definitely appeals to a wider audience. I don't think it's so much like people aren't necessarily going for the latest and greatest graphics anymore. It's more about how does the game make them feel? How does the game bridge their social circle? And with Valorant specifically, because I come from a first-person shooter background, first-person shooters have notoriously been very male-dominated. Valorant is very interesting because, you know, where the sort of divide between genders is closing rapidly, and it's almost 50-50 at this point. Yeah.
Okay. You were saying how things are going more lo-fi these days. That's an interesting point. So why do you think that is?
I think it's because generally, you know, attention spans are shorter and people want things that can be played quicker, that can be, you know, also this, it's a wider appeal. You have PC at home, but also mobile gaming is a trend now. You know, very few people want to spend lots of money on a very intense PC setup. They want to be able to play on the same computer that they do their work, or, you know, if the working from home has become a trend. So not everyone wants to invest into a gaming PC or the latest console. You've seen this trend with Nintendo scrapping their development in like flagship consoles and focusing more on handheld Switch devices that can couple as a social play experience. So I think that's one side. And then the other side is you have games like Minecraft and Roblox, right? Roblox isn't necessarily a game. It's more of a platform where young children can actually develop their own games and creating their own games. So that social element, I think, is a big part of it as well.
Okay. But for the hardcore gamer or competitive gamer, what can you tell us about evolving gaming technologies?
Yeah, so I mean, the rate of change of, you know, the development is getting more and more exponential. And I think you're seeing games today that we couldn't even imagine like 10 years ago, right? And then I think, like I said earlier, with the advancements of tech, specifically with AI and how that's going to go, I think games are going to become even more immersive and even more sort of blur the lines between what's real and what's not. You know, we're still at very infant stages of like VR and AR. But as that continues to develop, I can imagine it to be super immersive, like the movie Ready Player One that we saw many years ago. A lot of elements of that are starting to come to fruition.
Okay. And in 2025, what are some of the challenges you are anticipating or you think esports teams and agencies like yourselves will face?
I don't think they're necessarily new challenges. They're the same challenges we've had for a few years already. And that's really just how do you scale and how do you define your business model? The business model of esports has shifted as the sort of trends have shifted. You know, from 2015 to about 2020, there was a lot of interest in the VC market, and there was a lot of cheap VC money that was pumped into the ecosystem. But, you know, whichever way you look at it, it didn't play out for some of the big players. A lot of teams mismanaged, and VC started to pull back their interest and their time. So the byproduct of that was that a lot of esports organizations grew almost too big for their own good, hiring a lot, expanding teams too quickly. It became sort of bidding wars between teams in terms of getting players and increasing salaries unnecessarily to compete, right? Because you want the best players, so you jack the prices up of their salaries. And that became very unsustainable very quickly. That kind of has died down now. And, you have seen in the last 2-3 years a lot of esports organizations that have been around for a decade or more ending up having to close shop just because they can't keep up. I think another big trend that's happening now is the rise of new platforms that are happening. So the Saudi Arabia Esports Federation creating the Esports World Cup, which has renewed interest and spirit for organizations and given them a pathway for something else to compete in. But overall, I would say the challenge remains the same, and that is really how does esports viewership grow to the rate of traditional sports viewership? In certain games, that has already happened, but for all games to compete in esports, for all of the boats to rise with the tide, will continue to be a challenge, I feel.
Okay, Nick, we're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, in recent years as well, something new has come up in this space. We see more influencers and content creators. So how do you see the role of these people evolving in the gaming world?
Yeah, so that's also a good question. I think we are starting to see a lot of, similar to what's happening with the music and movie industry, kind of cross-pollinating. We're seeing influencers, what you call traditional influencers, reach out and deploy tactics that gaming influencers have, like live streaming is becoming a very big proponent. I'm a F1 fan, and I like seeing like the F1 drivers live stream on Twitch or YouTube. So I think this trend will continue because that live experience for fans and for consumers is something that they enjoy and that they can relate to. I think generally also speaking, brands are understanding where the attention of the youth is, and so gaming influencers are starting to get more endorsement deals and brand deals to sort of reach that audience.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your insights, Nick. He is Nikhil Hathiramani, co-founder and CEO of esports consultancy IMPLS Entertainment and PaperX, which is one of Asia's premier professional esports teams. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you so much.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.